And then specifically, he seemed to have a real weakness for Philistine women. Sometime around 20 years later, we see Samson again. And he went to Gaza and he saw a prostitute there. And he went into her. So we see Samson, and we get the sense, by the way, that Samson is a pretty solitary figure. Even his own people betrayed him. He walked alone with God much of his life. He never did marry. So we get this sense of loneliness that's kind of sad, but he's going to go and he's going to fulfill that in the wrong way. He's going to go see a prostitute, and not just any prostitute. He's going to a Philistine woman, because Gaza is in the Philistine province. Now, when the Gazites were told Samson's come here, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. Their plan is they're going to take him in the daytime. Now, 20 years have passed. Samson was probably 20-something when he killed 1,000 Philistines. But, after a while, you start wondering, well, is that even really a true story? Maybe that was exaggerated. And now he's in his 40s. And they're thinking, we can take him. But here's what we don't want to do, because he is fast. We don't want to attack him at night. We'll wait until daylight when we can see him clearly. But they locked the gate to the city, so he can't get out. Now, you have to understand that in those days, they would have a foundation, and they would lay the gates there first. And then they build the walls up around that, because the gates were always the weak part of a city. So they made those especially strong, so when armies attacked them, the gates would withstand the army. And that's where they're waiting. They've locked that gate. If Samson comes out, he's going to find out he can't get out. We have locked him in. And then we're going to surround him, and we have him. The only problem was they forgot who they were dealing with. Because Samson got up at midnight, took hold of the doors of the gate of the city, watch this, and the two gateposts, pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron, and stuck them down. You think you're going to stop me with a gate? He's telling them. He picks them up, walks right past them, puts it on the hill. And all the men waiting and all the soldiers with them went home and changed their underwear, because they had never seen anything like this. This is just phenomenal. That gate is supposed to stop an army, and he just picked it up and carried it. When the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Samson, he's superhuman. He performs miracles of strength. Some time passes, we don't know how much time. And it came to pass that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, which, by the way, also in Philistine territory, whose name was Delilah. Now, we know where the story is going to go from here, but I want to spend a little bit of time here, because you have to see, first of all, he's back again. He just can't help himself. He's drawn to the Philistine women. And he's coming here, and I really believe that he fell in love with her over time. Not love at first sight. This wasn't, go get her for she pleases me. But he saw her. She was beautiful, but she was more than beautiful. She was smart. She probably was the most beautiful woman in the land. And there was some part of Samson who'd spent 20-some years in ministry, if you will, doing God's will, who thought, you know what? I deserve a little pleasure. I do. I've done the job. I've done the work. I do hard work. I've worked for God. I've never complained. But you know what? It's me time. It's a little bit of Samson time. I need this. I deserve this. And so he went to Delilah, and Delilah was approached by the Philistines. When they found out about this relationship that was gone, and it must have been very public, I'm sure Samson was strutting around the cities with Delilah on his arm, the strongest man, the most beautiful woman. What a match, This is like the star quarterback and the supermodel wife. They're just walking around, and he's thinking, you know what? Finally, I've got it. And he's enjoying himself because he's in love with her, and he's in love with the life, and he's enjoying his time here. But the Philistines, the lords of the Philistines, come to Delilah and says, entice him. Find out where this great strength comes from, because they knew it wasn't natural. And by what means we may overpower him. And if you do this, each one of us, and there was a bunch of them, will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. That is a fortune. But you know what? I don't think Delilah cared. I think Delilah would have done this for free, because I think she was the kind of woman who collected trophies. And the idea of having Samson, the world's strongest man, at her beck and call appealed to her. So she starts to work on him. Tell me the secret of your great strength. Now, remember, God spoke to Samson. The Spirit of the Lord was with Samson. There is no way he walked into this one blind. God must have been screaming at him, get away. Leave. What are you doing there? Get away. But Samson's, you know what? I've got this. And for once, I'm going to do something for me. I'm tired of these 20 years serving the Israelites who don't even care. This time I'm going to do this for me. I deserve this. I've done the time. I deserve this. And besides, she's nothing. I got this. And so he plays with her. She tells him, these are some whoppers. The first thing he says is, you know what? If you ever tied me with 7 fresh bowstrings, I'd be as weak as a kitten. The next day he wakes up, guess what? He's tied in 7 fresh bowstrings. And he just breaks them and laughs at her. But now she's pissed because she's not used to a man playing back like this. And she starts on him again. He said, well, you know, I was kidding about that. But honestly, new ropes that have never been used before. If I were tied in those, I couldn't do anything. The next day he wakes up, he's tied in new ropes that have never been used before. And he breaks them and laughs at her. Oh, now she's really angry. And she lays into him even more. And she's not just nagging. Delilah's smarter than that. She's enticing. She's seducing. She's picking her spots. Sometimes she nags. Sometimes she seduces. And Samson's loving all of it. Man, he's got this woman giving him all of her attention. He's loving this. The most beautiful woman in the kingdom. He loves this. And so he tells her the next lie. If you wove the 7 locks of my head into the web of a loom. This one's weird. But guess what happens the next day when he wakes up? Yep, he's womb man. He's loom man. And they're all woven up. And again, he just takes it out and laughs at her. And she's very angry now. And she doesn't stop. The thing you have to understand is the God of pleasure never stops. The God of pleasure is very patient. It'll continually come back again and again and again because it knows that you may pass this test 999 times, but the 1,000th time, it'll get you, or the 1,010th, or the 2,000th, however long it takes. The God of pleasure is patient. It'll let you enjoy the pleasure until it comes time for it to ask for its tribute. That's how this works. And so Delilah doesn't stop. And she keeps her little web going where she alternately nags him and seduces him and keeps saying, you don't even love me. And the Bible says that Samson got vexed from her constant and relentless pursuit. This is a complete reenactment of what happened to him with the woman from Timnah. Very same thing. Samson had to know what was going on. He'd seen this play before. He knows what happens. But after a long period of time, he finally tells her his hidden secret. Don't tell anybody else, but I'll tell you. But you have to understand that pleasure is not love. Delilah never loved Samson. He was only there for her to use. And that's the God of pleasure, folks. The God of pleasure doesn't love back. It's only there to use them. And as soon as he told her the truth, and she knew this time, by the way, the Bible said she could see it in his eyes. He told her the truth this time. She calls the Philistine lords. Now the Bible tells us that she caused him to fall to sleep on her knees. And I think this may have been part of what Samson's strategy was. I'll tell her, but she'll never be able to do it. You know, I'm a lighter sleeper than that. But women are smart, and I believe she gave him the night of his life, wore him out until he fell asleep. On her lap, on her knees, and she calls for a man and had him cut off the 7 locks. And then she began to shave him. Some translations say torment him. And his strength left him. Now God has put up with a lot with Samson. It's he understands his weaknesses and he loves him through them. And he's been with him through everything, even when he went to the prostitute at Gaza. God stayed with him. God protected him. But this is a whole different level now. Because what he has done is he has taken this person, this Delilah, And he's told her the secret of the strength. He's basically going to let her help him break the vow that he made to God. And God said, Samson, I can't protect you anymore. He was with him for all those years. He protected him against thousands and thousands of Philistines. But that was always because they were coming against him in battle. This is different. This time Samson knowingly betrayed his God. He basically said, I don't want this to end. I don't want the pleasure that I'm in with Delilah, this life I'm leading here. I don't want it to stop. And I am willing to trade anything I have, including his relationship with God, to make sure that it didn't end. But of course, it ended immediately because Delilah wanted nothing of him. It was a game for her too. And once she got what she wanted, the Philistines got Samson. They took him, and the first thing they did was they put out his eyes, blinded him. And then they took him down to Gaza, same place where he picked up the gates and walked away from in triumph. Now he's back there in the prison, in fetters, and he becomes a grinder, where they basically walk around in circles all day long and they grind the flour. That's Samson. Think about this. The last thing he saw before he lost his sight forever was Delilah laughing at him. Now, I don't know whether or not you have ever had somebody that you really loved betray you, but this hurts. This hurts very deeply and very completely. And that's what Samson had to live with. You have to understand that the God of pleasure doesn't just kill you. First, it humiliates you, and then it destroys you. And we've seen this. There's been a lot of very public Christian figures which have succumbed to the God of pleasure and put it in front of their relationship, their ministry, and their connection with the Lord God. And it always ends first in humility and then destruction. The point is, Samson had to know. There's no way you can read this story and not know what's going to happen next. Samson saw it again and again and again, and he had to know what was going to happen. There's no way that he couldn't have known. He saw it, he just didn't care. Maybe he thought he could control it where she wouldn't get to his head, but it didn't matter. He let this happen. He kept going over and over. Now, I believe that at some point Samson's lying in prison, and he's renewing it in his mind. He's thinking about what he may have done differently. And after he gets over the anger, the betrayal of Delilah, he must have turned his attention to God. And he must have been angry at that. He must say, God, what are you doing? Where were you, God, when she was calling the barber? Where were you? Do you not remember? I am the only person who stands between Israel and Philistine. I am the judge. What are they going to do now? What's Judah going to do now that I'm gone? God, what were you thinking? Why didn't you stop this from happening? And God says, I tried to stop this from happening. You wouldn't listen to me. And then you know what Samson no doubt did then? Because we all do this. Well, it's Delilah. God, do you know how beautiful she was? I'm not the only man she made stupid. That's almost unfair. If she just hadn't tricked me, if she hadn't called the barbers, I wouldn't be where I am right now. And God said, Samson, don't you dare blame Delilah. I spoke to you and I told you to get out of there. But you never did you? You had to stay. You had to keep taking the test until one day you would fail. And I say this because oftentimes we do this, right? We fail, we fall into temptation, and our first instinct is to blame Delilah. Whatever tempted us, that's the problem. You know, alcohol is just too strong. Once I got high, I just fell in that relationship. I couldn't get out of it. Just whatever it was just too strong, right? Our temptation was just too strong. Delilah's the problem. It's not us, God. The temptation's too strong. How do you expect us to beat this? I have a very good friend who's a pastor, And he was counseling with a woman once, and the woman was going through an affair. And she'd actually met him in church, and they were together illicitly. And she had a husband and 2 young kids, and she was kind of unburdening herself through the pastoral counseling. Now, if you ever go to a pastor for counseling, you'll probably be disappointed because you'll be expecting them to give you advice. But usually they just take notes and say, well, tell me, how do you feel about that? And that's what they train you to do, because the people need to kind of come to the conclusions on their own. And so he was listening to her as she was going on and on about this affair, and how incredibly attracted she was suddenly to this man in a way she had never felt before. And she even believed this must be from God, because it was such a strong attraction. Surely it came from God. And she was describing the first time they got together, and she said, when he touched my hand, it was like electric. And when he pulled me into his arms, there was no way anybody could have resisted. It was just so strong. I couldn't have resisted. And my friend put down his pen and said, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You're saying that when he pulled you into his arms, there was no way you could have resisted. She goes, right, nothing I could do. He said, huh. So if at that moment your husband and 2 children had walked through that door, you would have had sex with them anyway? She said, well, of course not. This is why my friend's no longer a pastor, by the way, with things like that. But she said, well, of course I would have stopped then. And he picked his pen up and said, then I guess he could have stopped, huh? See, this is what we do, though. We blame Delilah. The Bible puts it this way. God is faithful and will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape that you may be able to bear it. This is Paul writing. He says, look, there's no temptation that doesn't have a way out. This is a promise from God. He always knows your weaknesses, and he has a way out for you, but you have to want to take it. But here's what we do. We ignore it, and we ignore it, and we ignore it, until we get to the point where it's too late. And then we complain. What happened? And this is a military phrase, but listen, the time to start fighting is not when the enemy's knife is against your neck. That's not the time you start the fight. When you see the enemy approaching is when you start the fight. When you get here, it's too late. You have to be willing to say, this is important. I got to make sure I don't fail, and I will do whatever is necessary in order to make sure that I don't fail. And the reason for that is I don't want to lose the power of God in my life. I don't want to be separated for a moment from the power of God in my life. Jesus understood this. This is why he says this. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. You know, what he's saying is, it's real simple. If that's the problem, and of course we all know this isn't the problem, right? It's our heart. This is what Jesus is saying. If that's your problem, the solution's simple. But the solution's always simple, as long as we see it as a problem. If we say that's the most important thing, boy, if I do this, I'll die, therefore I need to do this. It's funny how fast you come up with solutions. You know, boy, every time I go into work, I drive by this place and it just sucks me in. I can't help myself. Find a different way to work. There are a lot of roads. You know, whenever I'm with this person, I can't help it. I just can't resist. We end up doing stuff that we shouldn't be doing. Okay, well, unfriend them off Facebook and block them on your phone. If that's the person is causing you the problem, cut them out. Get serious about this. Well, late at night, internet porn is just too much for me to handle. Okay, so install NetNanny and give somebody else the rights to your password. If you take this seriously, if we look at this stuff not as little things in our life, but sin, which causes Jesus to bleed and die, then it's really easy to find the way out. We just have to be willing to want it. We have to see this the way God sees it, and we have to drive the enemy out of our lands. And if we're not willing to do that, we will continue to fail because we continually put ourselves in a place where failure is the only option. So you have to ask yourself, what's pleasure worth? And again, please understand, I'm not saying that pleasure needs to be eradicated from your life. I'm saying it cannot rule your life. You can't live your life, even for a moment, for just pleasure. I don't care what God wants. I don't care what my family. I'm going to have this moment of pleasure because I deserve it. What's happened is you've put the God of pleasure on the throne of your heart. And I promise you, and I'm telling you this from experience, first it will humiliate you, and then it will destroy you. A couple weeks ago, I opened a sermon with a poem, and I hope you all won't mind if I end today's with a poem. Behold Delilah as she stands in the night, so radiant, so beautiful, what a sight. To see her is to want her, to know her is to crave. This woman has no friends, only enemies and slaves. What strength it must take to resist her charms, strength that's not measured by the circumference of an arm. Now, Samson, I know you are feeling hard to beat, but I wonder if you're ready for this kind of deceit. You see, she's wicked, deceitful, the devil's chosen bride, and she wants nothing of you. Don't be stupid or blinded by foolish pride. If you listen to her, you're through. But now you cry out in anguish, please understand, I can't help but listen, though I know it's wrong. Well, then don't heed my advice. Go ahead, Samson. But, Samson, don't blame Delilah when your strength is gone. Now, sometimes like Samson, I'm feeling quite strong, just daring temptation to sing me her song. But of course, if I listen, I'm fooling no one. The battle's waged, the decision made, long before the deed is done. And the snake is in the garden, and Delilah is in her room. Temptation is hanging there, like a lingering perfume. What's that magazine that's on your bedstand? What's that thing that's close at hand? How can we fight the battle with the enemy in our land? You see, she's wicked, deceitful, the devil's chosen bride, and she wants nothing of you. Don't be stupid or blinded by your foolish pride. If you listen to her, you're through. And now you cry out in anguish, please understand, I can't help but listen, though I know it's wrong. Well, then don't heed my advice. Go ahead, Christian. But, Christian, don't blame your Delilah when your strength is gone. Would you all pray with me now?